that we should be thinking about for 2014 legislative session. And to start that, I want to invite Larry Metz, and you're District 32, right?
Yes, John.
Larry Metz, who is the sitting representative for District 32, to please come up. And Larry, we're going to give you 10 minutes, but once you take the podium, it's yours until you give it up, our friend. We appreciate you coming.
Oh, don't tell him that.
No, I'm going to tell him. Come on, and then you can take that seat or there, whatever.
Okay, well, thank you, John. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here and be a part of the meeting this evening. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, John. I believe John, his intention when he invited me to come was to give you a preview of the 2014 legislative session, what I think the issues are going to be in Tallahassee. And of course, in the world that I live in now as a legislator, there's a lot of time between now and the session. It's 6 months or so from now we will be there. And in the legislative cycle, that's an eternity. Just a lot of things could happen between now and when we actually get there. But I will give you some insights into what I believe some of the bigger issues will be. I don't really have anything specific to discuss tonight about the 6 bill slots that I have an opportunity to fill with legislative ideas, because I'm still working on that. Like I said, there's a lot of time left, and I don't want to lock myself into bill commitments when there's so many things that I could do with those precious 6 bill slots. But first of all, every time we meet in session in March, that follows committee weeks. Committee weeks are when the committees actually get together and meet in Tallahassee, but the session's not on yet. We start our first committee week later this month on September 23rd, and so we have 1 week a month for the rest of this year, and then there's 2 weeks in January and 3 weeks in February that we'll be meeting in committees without session being occurring at that point. And then once session begins in early March, we have 60 days of session, and the committees continue to meet for the first weeks of session. Usually subcommittees meet about 4 or 5 weeks in the session and then stop meeting, and the full committees continue to meet for another week or two. And then near the end of the 9-week session, we're on the floor all the time, considering the bills that made it through the committee process. My committee assignments for 2014 are pretty much the same as before. I'm going to be chairing the Civil Justice Subcommittee, which comes under the jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee, on which I also sit. And then I'm on the Justice Appropriations Subcommittee and the Choice and Innovation Subcommittee. That's 4 committee assignments. I had 5 in the last session, but that was the 5th one was a select committee on claims bills. It's no longer in existence, so I did not pick up the 5th committee assignment, which is fine. More time on the other 4. So we'll begin probably with PowerPoint presentations in the early weeks of committee, and then we'll have eventually bills coming through. And the way bills work, once a bill is filed by a member in the House, and of course this occurs in the Senate as well, it's referred to committees based on the subject matter of the bill. It might have one, well, at least 2, a subcommittee and a full committee, at least 2 usually, but it could have 3 or even 4 committee assignments. So the bill has to make its way through each of those committees in order to be eligible for consideration on the floor. And so the committee chairs have a lot of sway in deciding which bills to hear when their committees meet. So that's one of the first things you've got to do as a member, and we have 4 aspiring members right here, and whoever's the winner of this race will find this out. There's a lot of work involved in getting your bills through the committees, because you want that to happen so you can get to the floor with it. So a lot of what we'll be doing between now and session will be dealing with committee work. But the big issues that I see happening in 2014, of course, the first one that we always have to deal with is the budget. That is the one constitutional obligation the legislature must fulfill when it meets in regular session. Now, the budget projections for next year are looking pretty good. We're actually doing better in Florida in the forward year than we have been doing in the past. And our current year budget estimate was revised upward recently. So even though we thought we had more money coming in when we passed the budget back in, I guess it was May, when we passed the final budget, early May, the revenues have increased since then in the current year. And then for the next fiscal year that we'll be dealing with in session, the estimate is 4.4% more than the current year revised estimate, or about $1.15 billion more in revenue being collected under our tax structure. So that begs the question, what will the legislature do with $1.15 billion in additional revenue above the current budget year? and this will be something that will have to be vetted through the various appropriations subcommittees and the ultimate appropriations committee in each chamber, with leadership direction from the House and the Senate presiding officers, and the committee process and public hearings and inputs from a wide variety of sources. So I can't predict to you what will eventually happen. I'll just share with you what I think should happen in general. First of all, I don't think any new revenue stream that we see over and above current expenditures, if it's non-recurring, you should not begin to even think of spending that on anything that's recurring. So if you have a one-time hit because something produced more revenue, you might want to take that and either use it to give it back to the taxpayers who provided it in the form of tax cuts or fee reductions. Or if you find that you want to spend it on something that's one-time only, like infrastructure improvements that might be needed. So that would be my preference. I think we're going to see a tax cut of some sort, maybe fee reductions, or maybe a combination of tax cuts and fee reductions with that $1.15 billion. Governor Scott has taken the lead on that. He's doing a listening tour around the state right now to get ideas on what the tax cuts should be, or fee reductions should be. There's a number of things that could be done. One thing is back in when the economy was doing really bad, I was in the legislature at that time, but they increased the fees for driver's licenses and other things, vehicle registrations quite a bit, in order to close a budget gap. Well, it might raise the question legitimately in my mind is, if those hard budget times force those increases because of exigent circumstances, and now we see more revenue coming in because the economy's turned around and we're now receiving more revenue, maybe it's time to roll back those fees and put the money back in the pockets of the people who earn the money. So I think that would be a very important priority for me. But in a legislative arena, your opinion is only yours, and you have to count up all the opinions to get a result. But I do think tax cuts and fee reductions are going to be on the table. And the other thing we have to remember is that even though we have $1.15 billion in projected new revenue, and we're going to be focusing on that, what happens to that? Let's not forget about the other $70+ billion that we're already spending, that has to be spent wisely as well. So we have to have oversight of that money. We don't just want to assume that all that money is spent the same way just because we spent it before. So there should be a real close look at every dollar, not just the new dollars. That's my point there. Some of the other big issues that I think we're going to be looking at, I think you'll see Medicaid expansion surface again, if for no other reason than that I think the Democrats still want it, and they made a big deal about it in the last session. We did not expand Medicaid, as you well know, but they made it an issue toward the end of the session. And I think there are a lot of legitimate arguments that people have made about why we should take it, but it doesn't change the fundamental facts that led me to oppose it, in my view. But I think the issue could come back. But another issue that we'll see talked about is perhaps the stand your ground law, because again, I think the Democrats will want to bring that forward and try to make something of that. We're going to have a hearing on that in the Criminal Justice Subcommittee, probably later this month. I don't know for sure, but I know that the Speaker has pledged to have a hearing on that in that subcommittee. And I saw that there was a 3-hour committee hearing time scheduled in that subcommittee, so I thought maybe that might be then, but I don't know for sure when that will be. Another issue that we're going to see come up is education. One of the issues is Common Core. There's a lot of information out there on that right now. We know that. I think you're going to see the leaders of both chambers want to open that up and have input from the public, hearings, and we're going to take inventory of that. I'm doing my own independent due diligence on that. I want to learn more about the history of it and the actual standards themselves. And so I'm going to keep a close eye on that and learn as much as I can. I've gotten a lot of good public input already. I certainly do not want to see federal preemption of our curriculum. That's just unacceptable. What I'm trying to grapple with is to what extent does Common Core allow that or facilitate that. So we're going to look at that very closely. I think you're going to see the leaders of both chambers wanting to have that examined closely. Another issue that may come up, I think it will be discussed somewhere, is gaming. Now, I ran on a platform in 2010 of opposing expansion of gambling in Florida, and I haven't changed my view one bit about that. But there are issues out there that I think people want to look at in the legislative arena about gaming, and it has to do, I think, with the fact that even though we have traditionally considered ourselves to be a non-gambling or non-gaming state, there's a lot of gambling going on, or gaming. I like just to call it what it is. It's gambling. Okay? But gaming is now the term that people use. But whatever you call it, there's too much of it. And so they want to look at, well, what are we doing as a state to regulate that? And so they've appointed select committees on that in the Senate. I know for sure there's a select committee. I expect there are going to be hearings on it at the committee level at least, if nothing else. I don't think of anything big coming out of that. I really don't predict that we're going to see destination casinos. Not only is that a bad policy for the state of Florida, but it's something that even if you had pockets of support for it, say in South Florida, it would really undermine our family-friendly tourist destination reputation in Central Florida. So I don't buy the argument that, well, if it's good for South Florida, let them do it, and let's not worry about it. Once we get it in our state, it'll be hard to get rid of it. Another aspect of education that I didn't mention before is digital education, the digital, I guess, frontier that we're on. We're just scratching the surface so far. We passed a bill in 2013 that, for example, one of the big things in that bill was to enable the University of Florida to establish a full-time, online four-year degree program where someone could actually get a four-year degree from the University of Florida completely online. And the challenge to the University of Florida in taking that on is obviously a high-quality program that is integrated and real. It's not just people logging on and taking an occasional course, but a real integrated program that would lead to a four-year degree, but at a very low cost relative to the traditional brick-and-mortar four-year education. That's the key. If you're going to embrace this technology that we're seeing, where we no longer need this brick-and-mortar approach with the big lecture halls, when people can use technology to plug in and actually learn about the material ahead of the lecture and then attend an online lecture and go back and look at a tape of that if they didn't keep up with everybody, and be able to learn at their own pace at a very reduced cost. We can exponentially increase the number of people that are able to take advantage of high-quality educational opportunities. If you think about the old way of doing things, and I say old respectfully because I'm putting myself in that category myself, four-year attendee at the University of Florida, September to June every year, summer off working, brick-and-mortar classrooms, dormitories, the whole 9 yards. And because of that, if you think about that traditional educational delivery system for higher education, then there's only a limited number of seats available. And we know that from the admission challenges that people face getting into places like the University of Florida. And it was easier back when I got in, so that's when I got in. I don't know that I would make the cut today. But so why limit people, though, if we have the technological ability to deliver that quality of education where they can accept it and take advantage of it? So that's going to be, I think, something you're going to see a lot of that in the next few years, not just this coming session, of fine-tuning the opportunities that digital education provides. We're already seeing it throughout our K-12 system with Florida Virtual School and with individual school districts having their own digital programs. So I've just given you a series of big issues that I think we'll be facing in the 2014 legislative session. There'll be a lot of other issues that come up, some things we don't even know about right now, perhaps. And one thing about the legislative process in Florida, first of all, I'm very glad that we only meet 60 days a year. And I say that not only from a personal perspective, but it's a good thing that we're only part-time, because look at where full-time legislatures operate. Congress is a great example of a full-time legislature and why you don't want one like that. California went to a full-time legislature. And my wife and I visited our daughters out there because they were out there in the service, and they've returned out there. And I'm amazed at how big the place is, and I see all these people everywhere driving around, and I'm thinking, wherever they're working, they're giving 11 or 12% of their income to the state of California. I paid sales tax on the things that we purchased, and it's not 6%, it's 8 and something, I think. All this extra money the government is taking from people out there, and their full-time legislature has created a system that needs more money still. They're significantly out of balance there. So anyone that makes the argument to a group that we need more government or higher taxes, I mean, the examples are funded that it doesn't work. And so we are very grateful in Florida to have a conservative approach. Our bond rating for our bond obligations at the state level was reaffirmed. It's AAA, in Florida. with that budget surplus I'm mentioning to you before, and unemployment is 7.1%. That's significantly down from a year ago. It was 8.7%. So we're really doing pretty good in Florida. We have a lot of work to do, and we'll roll up our sleeves and get it done here in the next few months. And with that, I'd like to take any questions that you have about the 2014 session. Yes, Russ?
Going back to the gaming situation, I share your feelings, but one of these days, Cuba is going to shake off communism. And when Cuba does, I'm going to predict they're going to become the Las Vegas 90 miles off our shore. What do we do in anticipation of that economic development threat of flying 90 miles past Florida to Cuba?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that as far as the gambling potential that they would have. I would hope that when the Cuban people are finally done with communism, and I hope that's soon. I mean, it's been too long already. And I'm just surprised that they've actually been able to transition from one Castro to another. I wish they would have just been able to get rid of both of them. But right now, we're still stuck with them. But when they finally move on and the Cuban people have true freedom, I think there'll be a lot of people from America, and particularly Florida, particularly even the Cuban-American community in South Florida, that will repatriate down there in terms of their moving their capital and starting businesses and try to get that economy going. And I just don't think the emphasis will be all on the gaming there. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have good, strong economic ties with a free Cuba that would be based on mutual interest and not just that one particular industry. So I'm hopeful of that.
We need to think about that possibility.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Hey, Jim.
I'd like to offer a suggestion on the 1.15 billion surplus. Rather than going it back in little pieces to everybody, we're one hurricane away from a financial disaster. I'd like to see it plow some of that money into citizens maybe, and then maybe lower the rates if you can, and pass that money, because most people paying taxes are the ones who are paying property taxes. We're also about writing insurance. So if you give us a discount on homeowners insurance, would be one way to get that money back, and also firm up our footing. Citizens is a disaster waiting to happen.
I agree with you, Jim. I think we have to depopulate citizens, and there's been resistance to that because some of the members in the legislature represent districts that are heavily reliant on the subsidized rates for those coastal communities where the risk is higher. And we need to really depopulate, and we need to get it back to where it was originally intended to be, an insurer of last resort. And eventually, a vibrant marketplace will eliminate the need for it completely, and I would be in favor of that. I do think that CFO Atwater is correct that insurance rates seem to be high compared to what they used to be because the reinsurance rates are coming down. So insurance companies that reinsure their risk are paying less now, but we're not seeing rate reductions for the consumers. He's raised that issue, and I'm hoping that we can bear down on that session as well, because it's not right that we would have high rates when the insurance companies are benefiting from changes in the marketplace. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Larry. I heard a rumor, and I'd like you to confirm whether or not you've heard it. I heard rumors that John Morgan is going to begin a campaign to legalize medical marijuana here in the state of Florida with the goal of electing his good buddy, Charlie Crist, as governor. Have you heard anything about that? And have you started thinking about running for Bill Nelson's seat when, it becomes available? Never too early to start thinking.
Thank you. I heard about the John Morgan initiative. He's actually out there subsidizing a petition drive to collect petitions to get it before the Supreme Court for ballot language review. So he's dead serious about that, absolutely. Now, what his ultimate strategy is in doing that, is it because he believes in medical marijuana, or does he really want to help Charlie Crist? You can speculate about that, but John Morgan is a staunch supporter of Charlie Crist. He's been helping him on his transformation from former Republican governor to what they hope will be the Democrat nominee for governor next year. So I'm sure he has a calculus there. Because look at the success of John Morgan in his practice of law. So he obviously knows something about strategies, and I'm sure he's got that in mind. I just can't say that I know for sure why he's doing it, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's for the reason that you suggested. Amy, and then I'll come back to
Larry, with the threat of Islam ever increasing in our state and in the country, are you still going to pursue passage of the American laws in American courts this session?
Thank you, Andy. Does everybody know what that bill is about here?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I ran it 3 years in a row, so you probably heard about it before. The problem we've had with that bill is getting it through the Senate. We got it through the House, well, 2 times in a row, this year and last year. But it died in the Senate on a 2/3 vote requirement by 1 vote. So I'm still weighing that. I want to file it again, and I want to work on it again, but I want to know more about what the landscape is in the Senate for that, because it was set up for a vote on the next to the last day of session, so it had to have a 2/3 vote, but there were only 26 senators who are Republicans, and the 14 Democrats in the chamber were in lockdown mode, and they all voted against it. So there was no chance for that bill to pass on the second to last day. So I don't know why that occurred, but I want to make sure. I don't want to do the same thing and get the same result. I want to see it pass. And I want to go back to one premise of your question, Andy, because I think it's important that this be clarified. You mentioned Sharia law, and the bill that I drafted doesn't discuss Sharia law at all. It discusses the application of foreign law in a Florida court where family law is the issue. It's family law proceedings. And it says to the court that if the application of that foreign law would violate the fundamental liberties, rights, or privileges of a litigant against whom enforcement is sought, then the court can apply it. And it would be equally applicable to any foreign laws as defined in the bill. And that's the laws of a foreign country. And a lot of opponents misunderstood that and were saying, oh, you're going to prohibit religious doctrines in churches. And that's not the intent at all. We even had a specific exception for ecclesiastical matters within a house of worship put in the bill, not because it was necessary, but to add comfort to the folks that were concerned about that. But the bill is neutral as to any foreign country. And I actually did some research and discovered that in Israel, when folks get divorced over there, the men have a huge advantage over the women under the rabbinical courts. And there were people coming to me saying, we oppose your bill because your bill would prevent Israeli law from being applied in a Florida court. When a couple comes here from Israel and they have a prenuptial and they want to have it enforced here, your bill would prevent that because guess what? Israeli law in the family context does not meet our Equal Protection Clause or our Due Process Clause of our federal Constitution. And I have that in a letter from the Anti-Defamation League. It's not something that I give you an opinion on. They said it in the letter to me. So this really is an issue that wraps around a lot of different foreign countries. And the idea being that although we are an open country to folks who legally immigrate here, like all of our forefathers did, legally immigrate here. I want to emphasize legal immigration. It's a very important distinction that is not emphasized enough in the current debate about it. But we want people to come here through the legal system and come here and assimilate and become Americans, but we don't mind if they bring their language or their culture and want to have the traditions of their homeland as part of their family culture or whatever. I mean, that's fine, but when you come here, you should expect that if your disputes make it to a Florida court, that Florida law is going to apply, not the law of the country you came from. And yet there are circumstances where the law of a foreign country could be requested to be applied. And so rather than have a blanket prohibition, which would be very difficult for the courts to handle when legitimate instances occurred, we gave a constitutional standard in the bill. Fundamental liberties, rights, and privileges. If it's violated by the application of foreign law in a family proceeding, you can't apply it. That's what the bill says. And I think that's fair and equitable to all folks who would come here from another country and want to have their matter litigated in a Florida court. And so I just want to say it was never about Sharia law from my point of view. It's about the Constitution.
Final question.
Yeah, no, there was one other.
That was my question. You answered it.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Okay, very good. Thank you for the opportunity, and I guess I will certainly all hear from
We do appreciate that very much, and the way you worked your schedule to get here is very much appreciated. Thank you.
My pleasure, John.
Joseph, come on up, take a seat up here. The next part of the program, we have 5 of the 6 Republican candidates for District 31, House of Representatives, which is an open seat this coming year due to term limits. And the one who could not make it was B. Grassel, who sent a letter to me thanking for the invitation. But she says, as a member of the Lake County Education Foundation Board, I had promised to participate in a foundation event on the same evening, and sometimes she can juggle events, but they're in different parts of the county, and she appreciates being invited, and please send her regards to the other candidate, to Representative Metz. So, except for the spelling bee that is going on right now, we would have had all 6 Republican candidates for that office, which I have to tell you, 11, 12 months out from an election is unbelievable. And we appreciate each of you being here. And what I want to do at this phase is to ask each of the candidates, and you're here as citizens of Central Florida running for a seat, having thought about issues facing our state, and we would like you in a few minutes to share your thoughts on those issues. But first, I want to ask each of you to come up and speak for about 2 minutes, and Andy, if you would, and just when you're done, say time, and then you can graciously finish what you're doing. We don't have a big hook here, so we don't have it out tonight anyway. So to start, let me start with this end and move down. So let me ask Joseph Stevens, and this is for 2 minutes. Just please tell us about yourself, anything about your background. You don't have to deal with the issues right now unless you care to. And you got 2 minutes, and let's start with Joseph Stevens, please.
I have to say this part takes a little bit of getting used to, even though I'm used to being regularly in the public. My background is that I'm a fraud examiner or investigator. I don't work for the banks, I work against the banks. So all of these things issues that you're hearing about along with the banks forging documents and robo-signing and all that kind of stuff, and you wonder who on earth is it that goes out and finds all these things? I'm that guy. Those boring things that put everybody to sleep, that's what I read. But the main reason that I decided to run, I finally came to that point one day of watching, just as Obama was getting reelected, and watching the different conventions going on, and just came to that point of deciding that I didn't see anybody out there that actually acted like they were representing you, that acted like it was somebody else's money they were spending, or that it was somebody else's children they were affecting. And so my reason for running is not because I think I'm the most Republican. It's just because when I look at what's currently going on in America, we can't sustain this. We can't continue with where we're going. We can't keep playing this game, and we've got to make some changes. At the same time, this area that we live in here in Lake County, if you wanted to say, how do you define Florida, you can't beat this. This is it. The roads that we have to drive down to get over here, this is Florida. And this is what everyone else needs to learn. This is what our tourists need to learn, is what we have here. So, again, my name is Joseph Stevens.
Thank you, Terri Seefeldt.
FL, and I'm going to try to figure out a way to squeeze 51 years into 2 minutes here, so I'll give it a shot. I grew up in Indiana. I am the oldest of 5 children, and learned at a very young age, if you want to drive a car or have anything, you better get a job. So I started working in high school. Got my first job at 18 out of high school managing ladies' clothing stores, and I was the youngest manager in the chain at 19. Worked in several places in Indiana, and then relocated to Kansas City, Missouri, and moved to Florida at the ripe old age of 22. So I've been down here ever since, 29 years now. Got in the insurance business 26 years ago, and that's where I kind of reignited my passion for politics. Started traveling to Tallahassee with my insurance association when I was pregnant with my son, and he just started GCF last week, or a couple weeks ago now, so I've been going there ever since, so 18 years. I've learned along the way that if you have relationships with legislators, if you talk to them, you understand the issues, and you present your positions, you can make a difference, you can make changes. I want to take the things I've learned in the last few years and apply it to Tallahassee. I've been giving speeches for years on healthcare reform. I'm not someone that sits around and waits for someone else to step up and take charge. I like to, if I know something and I can help someone, I like to step up and volunteer. Been known to have volunteeritis, I think, a little bit. So anyway, it would be my extreme honor to represent the people of this district, and I'm going to ask you tonight for your vote, and I'm going to keep asking you until the election. So thank you very much.
Jennifer Sullivan.
Well, good evening. My name is Jennifer Sullivan, and it's an honor to have the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Thank you, John, for organizing this meeting, for coming, all of you, this evening. Well, I've grown up in Lake County and been deeply invested in my community from a young age. I reaped the benefits of having a student-centered education, being home educated, and that really afforded me a lot of opportunities to get involved in the community at a young age, as well as to start working from a young age. At the age of 8 or 9 years old, I first started working in sales with my granddaddy, who I learned my work ethic from. He was a wildlife artist and traveled the country, and so at a young age I started traveling with him. And then as I started to get older, I got involved in the community through 4-H, and through that I saw a need within the community of hunger. And I got involved by working with the Board of County Commissioners and the school board, partnering with Publix, YMCA, and other organizations to fight the problem of hunger here in the community, and I did that through education and through food drives throughout high school. And about 4 years ago, I began involved in the Republican Executive Committee here in the county, and currently hold the position of district representative and sit on the board. And I got involved at the same time in the Tea Party, and actually 4 years ago today, I was not here in Lake County. I was in Washington, D.C., standing up for our rights. And that's something that I'm running on, is standing up for your rights and being your voice. My slogan is a fresh voice, and I'm running because my generation needs a voice in the Florida House, and this community needs a representative just like Representative Metz, who is going to listen to you, who's going to take interest to your concerns, and who's going to represent you. And that's why I'm running. The past 4 years, I've worked as a youth development leader across the U.S., training youth to understand the political process and engage them. And I look forward to earning your vote over the next year. Thank you.
Betty Hensinger.
I am Betty Hensinger, and thank you, John, for organizing this. I think that we have a long year ahead, but it's great to see everybody at one table sitting and getting to know one another. I moved to Florida in 1980 to go to work at the University of Florida, and surprisingly enough, shortly thereafter, my dog, which was a huge Alaskan Malamute, had to have surgery, and I wasn't making enough money at the university to afford the surgery. So I started an advertising company on the side. Within about 8 months, it dealt with agriculture and horticultural companies, and it was growing by leaps and bounds, and decided that I had to make a leap of faith, and I did, and I kept working with my advertising company, and it grew to an added value manufacturing company that did partner with companies in Israel and Spain and Germany, and so my life was very varied as a a manufacturing person in Lake County. As I moved my business to Lake County, I was very involved in the community, specifically the Chamber of Commerce in Mount Dora, but most importantly with an organization called our Turning Point Ranch. I don't know if anybody has heard of the ranch, but many realtors at the time that I knew, we decided there was a need to build a house for foster care teenage girls. There was not a place for them to go often. And so we worked within the community, decided to raise the money, buy the land, find a private mortgage company who helped us to do that. And so far we have had about 250 girls who have gone through our ranch. And when Senator Baker was a senator, we encouraged him to help change the foster care laws so that our kids would not have to leave foster care until they graduated from high school. I became a realtor and then a broker owner, and now I'm back being a realtor. And I too will work very hard to encourage you to vote for me, and I will seek your vote throughout this entire year. Thank you.
Dr. Randy Glisson.
Thank you. I apologize I was a little late for the social hour, but I was working through all the red tape of Obamacare this afternoon. My name is Randy Glisson. I'm a business owner, I'm a healthcare administrator, and I'm a chiropractic physician. I'm married to my wife Denise, and I have 3 children. My family moved to Lake County in 1963, and we've been active participants in the community ever since. I went through the Eustis school system, attending Lake Sumter Community College, and then going on to the Palmer College of Chiropractic, and then returning home to practice with my father, Dr. Jim Glisson. In 1993, I co-founded with my dad Lake Healthcare Center, which is a multi-specialty center with family medicine, with podiatry, and chiropractic. We are currently proudly representing 50 years of serving our community. In 1990, I was appointed by Governor Bob Martinez to act as the chairman of the Chiropractic Board of Medicine. I served on the Florida Hospital Foundation and was also helpful in raising millions of dollars, which helped begin a heart care center here in our local hospital. My family continues to give back to the community. I believe that the private sector is better in helping those in need than relying on the government. I'm a deacon at Bay Street Baptist Church. I've most recently been asked to serve on the Fellowship of Christian Athletes Board, which I was a member in school, and I won't tell you what year that was. You know, my dad served this community in Tallahassee in both the state House and state Senate. And I would, in 2010, with the overreaching arm of Obamacare, it got my attention. And I would ask for your vote in running for this State House of Representatives District 31. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we go, and we try to keep this moving along, so we're going to go to another lightning round of 2 minutes each. This time we're going to ask you to please focus on what you think we should be looking at as far as major issues facing the state of Florida. And again, 2 minutes, and Andy will give you the sign, and we'll move to the next one. After we do all 5 of them, then we're going to take your questions, and rather than give you more time, you'll get a chance to ask questions and hear from each of them again. So let's start again at this end with Joe Stevens.
Well, obviously, as I said before, my background being in being a bank investigator, one of the primary things that I'm focusing on is the banking reform, all the different things that they're doing, the control that they have over our economy, which is basically unchecked. And if any of you have ever had to be into court, especially recently in a foreclosure court, you'll understand that the system is completely skewed, that the banks or corporations are allowed to do things that if any of you did, any citizen did it, you'd be instantly locked up and put in jail. The bank doesn't even get a slap on the wrist. It's not fair. There's citizens that have been in their home for 60, 70 years that are being foreclosed on because they were behind for $134. You know, it's ridiculous the things that are going on, the lack of common sense that exists in the industry. But beyond that, one of my primary concerns really is attracting people to Florida, and especially this region, letting people really know the advantages of Florida, of our wildlife and lakes and the fishing and hunting and all the different things that we have outside of man-made attractions. Florida is an amazing place to come and explore. Okay. Outside of that, you know, these healthcare laws, as the good doctor brought up, we really have to attack that. We can't allow that or these new Sharia-type laws that are coming out that, forgive me for bringing up the subject, but literally allows for pedophilia. That, you know, 40-year-olds marrying 8-year-olds, and we're supposed to accept it. And we just can't go there. We are a civilized nation. We cannot go there. Thank you.
Terri Seefeldt.
There are several issues, and Representative Metz points, we are fortunate in our state that we are going to have a budget surplus. The legislature has been very good stewards of our money, and I know Governor Scott's on a tour right now to talk about how to put that money back in the pockets of the citizens. As a matter of fact, those increases in the taxes and fees alone, just here in Lake County, took $12 million out of the pockets of the economy and sent it to Tallahassee. That's money that could have been spent in the shops and the restaurants here in town. So that would be a good place to start. I also like Jim's idea with taking some of that surplus and shoring up the citizens' insurance. It's impeding our ability to lure other homeowners insurance carriers to the state. When they find out that the biggest competitor they have is the state of Florida, who doesn't have to put up the same reserve requirements that they do, it's very hard to attract new homeowners markets. And it's a big problem. They call it citizens because guess what? We own it. If that thing has, if we have one 100-year storm, 24 billion, we've got 10 billion in the bank. And every policy you own, from your homeowners to your business insurance, will be assessed for years to come. So it's something that needs to be addressed. And there are people in the House and the Senate that live along the shore whose constituents benefit from low rates and citizens. It is now the largest insurer in Florida. It has very little reserves to cover all the losses. Common Core is also an issue in the legislature. Unfortunately, even the leadership in the House and Senate are realizing there's a lot of problems. Debbie Mayfield out of Vero Beach has actually filed a bill to have parts of it stay and have Florida develop their own testing. So those are just some of the issues. And am I out of time? Oh, I have
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Wow. Okay. The other thing I think we need to address is malpractice insurance. Governor Rick Perry was just talking about that he has attracted 30,000 new physicians to the state because of the malpractice reforms. We have a very big problem here with our malpractice insurance and attracting physicians. We educate them and they leave because it's too expensive to do business here. Thank you very much.
Jennifer Sullivan.
Well, thank you. I'd like to take a little bit of a different approach to answering this question because I think one of the biggest issues that is facing our state has to do with understanding the role of government. I think that the issues are always going to change, and as Representative Metz pointed out earlier, even being as far as we are out from this year's session, so many things can still happen in our state. But I think what we need to address is electing candidates who are going to stand on principle, electing candidates who aren't going to waver when special interests are in their office, but are truly going to listen to them, electing candidates who understand state sovereignty, and not only understand the role of state sovereignty, but are willing to act upon it, who are willing to show leadership, who are willing to stand up for what's right, even if it means standing alone. And I think there's something to be said for being a team player with the Republican Party, but there's also something to be said for standing up for what's right and what's in the best interest of the people, not the politics, not the money makers for the state of Florida or the legislature. Pardon me. But I will say 3 specific issues that would be important that I would address if I was in the legislature, would be Common Core. As my fellow candidate mentioned, Representative Mayfield has sponsored the bill, House Bill 25, that she has introduced that has to do with Common Core, and I would be in support of what she's presenting. We also have a Senate bill that's been introduced. It's Senate Bill 122 that has to do with stand your ground, and I would be against that bill. I think the Second Amendment is a right that we need to protect. We need to have the right to bear arms and to protect ourselves. And so those are some of the specific issues that I would be for.
Hensinger.
I think that one of the major issues that I see our state facing, because I'm very close to this issue, is the amount of foreclosures that are still facing our state. We started this process somewhere in the neighborhood of 2005, so we've been going through it 7 or 8 years, and they say that we've only gone through about 1 million foreclosures in the state of Florida. And yet the banking industry says we still have 1.5 million that we are facing in the state that are, and that could be another 7 or 8 years. So even though we have a budget surplus that we might be facing, we could face an additional hard time in terms of tax revenues just because of the foreclosure process that still is ongoing and we're not out of it. Yes, we are selling houses, and yes, we are getting mortgages, but I don't think that we have completed the process that has been started in our state. The other issue that I think is going to be a real one in the years to come is the issue of water. We're seeing right now in South Florida, in Lake Okeechobee, where they have had a tremendous amount of rainfall, as we all have, but they have now wanted to shore up the shores of Lake Okeechobee because the runoff is going into the lake and going further into the Everglades. And so the farmers in that area of the state are really struggling because of the water issues and their ability to have water and use water and have it not be so costly to them in order to keep farming. So I think that water is going to be an issue. I do think that Common Core is going to be a huge issue because I think that the cost that they're projecting right now for the state to implement is somewhere around $1 billion. And certainly we don't have another $1 billion that we can take from our budget in order to implement Common Core. So I think that this is something that we're going to have to look at very seriously, make certain that we are putting our education system in the forefront and educating our students the way that Floridians want to, not necessarily the way the federal government wants to. Thank you.
Dr. Randy Glisson.
Thank you. One of the big issues that brought me into this race is health care. And as I see the overreaching arm of the federal government beginning to tell physicians how they work with their patients, it's having an effect on everyday life of doing business. Just like Common Core, and I think you get back to the issue is that the federal government is trying to mandate on us as a state and as a county, as a local entity, what's best for us. And it's been my experience that the private sector has been able to handle, and the local communities have been able to handle our issues better than it being dealt down from a large centralized government. So I would say that to protect states' rights would be one of my main issues. In passing good legislation, I think one of my first concerns would be always, is it constitutional? Is it fiscally sound? In other words, the bills that we're considering, how are they affecting taxpayers? How are they affecting the people that are working hard every day to provide those tax dollars? And then again, will this fix a problem? And what does this bill exactly do? And then I think you have to look at what is the short-term fix and what is the long-term fix. And again, in dealing with any bills that come through the legislature, I think at the end of the day, you say, is this morally sound? And I'm a Christian, and my bedrock is the Bible, and that when at the end of the day I make a decision, that will be part of it as well. Thank you.
I'm going to tell you, I'm impressed because I never heard so much packed into 2 minutes. I really am impressed with that. So now we move into your questions. And here's where I get to be a little ignorant, because we're going to keep it to about 15 seconds, please, your questions, and we're going to allow up to 1 minute for an answer. And I try not to be too ugly about it, but don't do the speech when you ask the question. Just ask a question, one question of one candidate, and then I'm going to ask that we move it around so we don't have all the questions going to one candidate. So up to 15 seconds in the question and no more than a minute on the answer. We don't need to time it. I'll just get a feel for it, give you the high sign. So let's start. First question for, and by the way, feel comfortable to just sit down, stay right there and answer from your seat. Stand if you want there. First question, please. Yes, Eli.
State sovereignty is an issue that runs across many issues. And what would you do to push back against the federal government where Attorney General is deciding what laws he's going to enforce and not enforce, which impacts us here in Florida, and what they're putting mandates or laws that cost us money that we have to pay for? How can we push back against the federal government to help reestablish states' rights?
Who are you asking that to?
Well, I'll start with who would like to take it up. I don't have any. That's an issue that I'm concerned about.
Anyone, one person?
Jennifer, would you do it?
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you for your question. Well, state sovereignty is something that's really important to me, and so I think, one, you need to look at, well, what is the role of the Florida government? And what is the role of the federal government? And are they impeding on our rights as a state? And then as a legislative body, I mean, it's really going to vary depending on the issue and what the role is. But I think it's something that you have to take an active role in pursuing and looking at. You can't wait till it just happens to you. You need to be looking at what's coming down, what's infringing on our rights. And I think the key thing is you have to know what your rights are as a state. As a legislator, you have to know what the Constitution of Florida says, so you know when your rights are being impeded on. And until you know that, you can't represent your people in that way. You can't fight for state sovereignty because you don't know what your sovereignty should look like. So that's how I would address it.
Thank you. Chair.
Along the same lines, to protect state sovereignty, will you be strong enough to reject funding from the federal government and their requirements on us? Doctor?
Yeah, I'll be happy to take that question. As a physician that accepts Medicare, I was mandated early that I had to begin working with Obamacare. Okay, I had no choice. And what I saw was that it was kind of easy in, oh, this is going to be easy, and a lot of promises. And then once you're in, then all the government red tape and all the expense follows. So I would be leery of the Medicaid expansion and reject it because I'm scared of the federal government promising us one thing at a price, but giving us something totally different. And again, what I'm finding is that what was told and promised, you know, as they begin to find out what's in the stack of papers, they're saying now it may be 100 pages of legal interpretations for one page of document. And as a physician, you get calls every day saying, are you abiding to this regulation so and so, so and so? So
thank you.
I would be scared of it.
Next question, please. Next question.
Hi, my name is Carol. I just wanted to ask probably Terry the same question about the Medicaid expansion. Married to healthcare, work in healthcare. Dr. Glisson, I understand your point. If I understand correctly, you're not in favor of Medicaid expansion. Terri, what's your point on the Medicaid expansion? Would you support it or would you oppose it?
No, I would not support Medicaid expansion. The problem is it would add approximately 800,000 to 1 million people to a system that's already accounting for 30% of our state's budget. We have a lack of providers that take Medicaid, so it would end up resulting in a lot of people with a card that they couldn't use. They would still end up in our emergency rooms. So you haven't accomplished anything. It is a system that's fraught with fraud and abuse, and until we clean that up, I think just cleaning that up and getting some of that fraud and abuse out of it would free up dollars to actually help people that do need help, because there are people out there that are falling between the cracks, there is no doubt. You just look at our food stamp fraud. I mean, there was a report that just came out that it was $100 million of fraud in our food stamp program in the last session that they went and reviewed it. So there's a lot of waste out there, and we need to address that.
Thank you. Next question, please. Is there a question for Joseph, or do we have one for Betty? Yes, Mike.
Yeah, I'll ask Mr. Stevens a question. One of my concerns as I look around is that I see that household income in Florida and household income in Lake County, when we start looking at what the quality of life for a median class family should be, is insufficient. So I just wonder if you have any ideas on how we can reconcile the cost of living with household income.
Actually, yes. One of the things I really appreciate about the Republican Party is that we, more than anyone else, recommend or try to promote business ownership. For people, just as our other candidate was saying, that she came down, she was working at the school, she wasn't making enough money at the school, but she started a small business on the side, and eventually the small business on the side replaced the mainstream income. As a Republican Party, this is something we try to promote a lot, is self-employed people having their own business, having it aside, not necessarily as a second job, but that second being that you're trying to work on a business and trying to put more people that you are in ownership of your own life. And because we all know that most jobs are created by small business. We really want to promote those small businesses. We want to make it easier for the small businesses to compete with the massive corporations, because corporations like Walmart, even though they're employing a lot of people, they're employing a lot of people below poverty lines. We really want more people that are having real jobs, making real incomes.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Betty, I don't want you to get left out.
Thank you.
We all know we're trying to reduce unemployment. One really nice way is to get better control over the illegal immigration that's occurring in the state of Florida. What would you do to begin to reverse the trend of having employers hire illegal aliens in the state?
I think that the one thing, of course, everybody talks about is the fact that we have to first secure the borders. Until we secure the borders, we aren't going to cure the problem. But the second thing is, if we have people that they're coming here because they want to work, they're wanting to come here because their jobs here are more beneficial to them and their families than where they're coming from. So we really need to make certain that we have the employers be more accountable to who it is that they're hiring, rather than there is a way that they're supposed to document all of them, but it's obviously not working, because they are working in our communities. So I think we need to look at the employers and making sure we shore up that end of the spectrum rather than just leaving it to a border control issue.
Thank you.
Very good. Yes, Carol.
I'd like to ask this question of Mr. Stevens. Even though we've had Republican majorities in the governor's office, in the House, and in the Senate, in Tallahassee, we continue to expand our regulations, particularly on small businesses. You mentioned you were in the banking fraud industry. Dodd-Frank obviously has a big effect on what you're doing. What would you do to stop this regulation overflow?
Yeah, and that's a good thing to call the regulation overflow. And that's what big government does, is they try to control and manipulate every little second and every little corner of your life, so that in every way you're obeying and following them. We honestly do not need new laws. the vast majority, not the vast majority, a large part of the laws that we already have on the books are not ever being enforced. We need to start rolling these things back, not coming up with all these new great ideas. We've got a lot of laws on the books. We could use them. Especially if we had more people, as you said, that actually understand the Constitution and the laws and what are our rights and what we can do. The number one problem that I see with the people that I serve is that they just have no idea what their rights are. There might be 335 separate laws protecting you on something, but if you don't know what it is, what good is it? So we really need a lot of reform on this overwhelming, especially from the federal side, laws. We need to take control of the House.
Thank you. Betty, you wanted to say
I did.
something?
Governor Scott in the last couple of years has rolled back, I think he says 2,400 regulations from the state side. But I also think that the county and the cities are coupling onto that regulation nightmare. So I think that not only do we have to work at it from a state level, but we have to look at it from a county level and, of course, a city level, because we enact laws or we enact regulations, but then we don't go back and revisit it. I remember when Tom Feeney was the Speaker of the House, he had in place a situation where you couldn't promote a bill unless you had two that you wanted to repeal or change. And he made you tell him when you were doing your bill submission what ones you thought that they should get rid of. And I think that would be a great thing to start once yet again.
Yes.
May I add to
Terri.
that? I heard someone say the other day, and I think this was a good statement, that we no longer just have 3 branches of government, we have 3.5, because most of these onerous laws are coming from regulatory agencies, and whatever they set are as good as gold, and they're very difficult to undo. I mean, there's over 30,000 pages of regulations stems from the original Obamacare bill that was 2,700 pages, and those are all from, you've got CMS, IRS, HHS, all writing bills and regulations at nauseum, and people are trying to keep up with it. Like the good doctor down here, it's very difficult for businesses to stay on top of all these things, and then they send the regulators out when you don't comply and audit you and fine you. So it makes it very onerous for businesses to comply when you have just people in the field writing regulations like crazy. So we need to keep good tabs on regulatory agencies as well.
Well, with that, we're going to end this, and I want to ask each of you, if you really appreciate the way I do, the time that you all took and the great presentations, let's show a little courtesy and please stand and thank these people.